Welcome to the Friday night edition of the Down-Ballot Progressive Candidate Summit. I'm really excited here on Juneteenth, at this extraordinary moment in our history, to have a woman who is running in Georgia's District 1, which happens to be the same district that Ahmaud Arbery actually lived in. So where she is, what she represents is so much an embodiment of what is happening in this country. Not only what has gone wrong, but what it is that we need to change. And in candidates like Lisa Ring, who you're going to be meeting tonight, we have an opportunity to make those changes. You know, I mentioned last night that when Lyndon Johnson signed the civil rights legislation, he said, well, we just lost the South for a generation. He didn't say we lost it for 50 years. What's happened is that there's been almost a surrender on the part of the Democratic Party in too many cases to some of these areas in the South, which absolutely are ripe, particularly now, for the kind of progressive politics that so many of us feel strongly about. Now, in Georgia District 1, Lisa Ring, who you're going to meet in a few minutes, in a couple of minutes actually, she actually came very close to beating a man named Buddy Carter, who has held that seat since 2014. She came close last time, and she's getting close this time. She's going to make it, but she's in a runoff, and that's why she needs our help. Her help is on August 11th. Her runoff is on August 11th. She is a real progressive candidate, and I want to bring her in right now, but I want to tell you something. Her picture on her website is so badass that this is a woman who, from the minute I saw her picture, I went, I want to have lunch with her. I wonder if she's going to have lunch with me. So Lisa, I can tell you honestly, I'm happy to meet all of the candidates that have been with us in the summit and all of the candidates that we've endorsed, but you really have been very compelling to me. And I really am very glad to meet you tonight. So welcome to the summit. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. You have quite a background. You have 4 children. You've been a corrections officer. You've been very, very active in the Democratic Party. This is your second run. And as we know, most people don't win that first time. So I want to really just give you the floor, particularly today, particularly on Juneteenth, everything from the district you live in, the history of racism in the district that you live in, the progressive politics that you stand for, your background as a corrections officer, and also this particular day of Juneteenth. What do people need to know about you in order for them to be very, very clear, as I am, that we need to support you so you can win this race?
Well, so to give you a little bit of background, I never saw myself as running for office. I got my start in political activism when I was in college. When I was 18 years old, I became a canvasser, a community organizer, and I really began to learn about the world around me and how to make changes. But also in that time, I was raising a family. I went back to college. I was a corrections officer. I was also the executive director of an anti-recidivism program in Pennsylvania that was very successful until the funding was cut. When I moved to Georgia, the first district of Georgia, which is near Savannah, it is the coast of Georgia, I saw that there was a lack of leadership in this district, and 85% of seats in Georgia were unopposed. It was just the incumbent running election after election with no Democratic challengers.
They just surrendered the field.
Yeah, it was not a democracy. It was really, people have no freedom in this district, and their needs are not being met. So many people in this district are just underserved. So I began organizing in 2013, and I started with the Democratic Committee and labor in this area, which is also picking up momentum, but is not very strong in Georgia. We're a right-to-work state. We are oppressed in every way in Georgia. So it has really been a challenge. My goal in running for office, first of all, was just to have a challenger to Buddy Carter, because nobody ran against him in 2016.
And just to be clear to everybody, he is totally lockstep with President Trump no matter what. That's the kind of Republican that he is, right?
Absolutely. He has received Trump's endorsement, and he's very proud of that. He is always right next to Trump when he can be, and he wants to be known as his biggest supporter. So my goal was to empower people in this district, for us to have the power to make changes and good governance, having leaders that actually cared about the people of this district, and to have a say in the national front in what was happening in policy. So we got out there, and I decided early on that this was going to be a grassroots campaign, that we were only going to be funded by voters and people who wanted the same changes that I wanted, and that we were going to knock on doors and talk to everybody regardless of party. And we did that. In 2018, we knocked on 50,000 doors in this district in all 17 counties. And we talked to Republicans, Democrats, and independents. And people were very responsive. It was very positive. So that was my goal, to empower people, to get them involved, and to make the changes that we needed to make. That started in 2014 when I actually worked on the campaign of another woman who ran for this same seat. And I saw some of the things that were challenges for her that I needed to change. One of the issues is that we in Georgia always run centrist candidates. We always run those candidates that are trying to bring in Republicans and trying to appeal to whatever they believe in, and really have no values of their own, certainly not progressive values. But I knew that since the majority of this country supports Medicare for all and supports progressive issues.
Hello.
Yeah, that if we had a candidate who was sincere and genuine and actually believed in the progressive issues that they were talking about, that we could win.
That's the soul of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party, I was raised to believe, it stands for working people, stands for the people, and we won't give people a chance to vote on that alternative at this point. And I share your conviction that if we place that option in front of people, they're hungry for it. They're more ready for it than the Democratic establishment seems to believe. And so when you go house to house, door to door, talking to people in your district, you feel that there is a listening and that there is an appetite for such things as Medicare for all, for such things as all of the progressive issues that you stand for and that all of our candidates stand for. That's correct?
Yes. So things have changed in the past 6 months with the pandemic. So we are not able to go door to door, and we are not able to have events, and I can't talk face to face with people. But when I was campaigning, the number one issue was healthcare. We live in a state where they did not accept federal funds to expand healthcare for the Affordable Care Act. And we have millions of people who are uninsured or underinsured. We have one healthcare provider. It is truly a crisis even before the pandemic. So the pandemic has really highlighted what we need to do with our healthcare system and how we have to start looking at healthcare as a human right and not a privilege for those who can afford it.
Now, you're in a runoff with a Democratic candidate who's in a more centrist position, not for Medicare for all and so forth?
Yes, I have not heard all of her platform issues, but when it comes to healthcare, she does not agree with Medicare for all. She does not believe in a single payer, universal comprehensive healthcare system. So that is a major difference between the two of us.
And I heard she's a little iffy on LGBTQ issues.
I have not heard any specific answers from her, any stand one way or the other on issues like reproductive rights and things like marriage equality for LGBTQ community. So
well, you yourself were a corrections officer. You worked on anti-recidivism. You yourself have been up close and personal, the tragedy of mass incarceration in the United States. I'm sure that in your work, I've worked quite a bit in prisons, you far more than I, but I'm sure that you feel as I do, that while some people clearly belong there, many, many people do not belong there. And the tragedy of this, when I was in prison, when I was in college, there were 300,000 people incarcerated in the United States. Now there are 2.3 million. And we know, of course, the terrible, terrible racial disparity. The kind of anti-recidivism programs that you were part of, you said the funding was taken away for that program, right?
Mhm.
So we have people coming back that because they get out of prison, and until very recently there wasn't even a conversation about ways that we might help people adjust and get back into society. What is a congresswoman? What are the kinds of things, given all the crises we have with the police today, all of the racial, systemic racial issues that we have, the criminal justice issues that we have, what do you want to do as a congresswoman to make some fundamental change?
There are so many changes that we need to make, but I think that where we need to start is the foundation of progressive policy, and that is eliminating the profit motive from everything. If we want to reform our policing system, our criminal justice system, our system of incarceration, we have to take out the profit motive, and we have to not allow for the privatization of our prison system and our law enforcement as well. We should not be locking people up for profit. And
it's so hideous that the various ways in this country that people have found ways to make $1 billion of profit off human suffering. And when they use the term prison industrial complex, it's a very real thing. The prison lobby in Congress is one of the largest. I mean, the very idea that people have a financial investment in more people going to prison, there's something so immoral about that.
And it is disturbing that our current congressman, in a roundabout way, invests in GEO Group, which is a private prison industry. So he is actually personally profiting from the private prison system that he is promoting. So that is a problem right there. But there are so many other issues that we have to address, having to do with systemic racism, having to do with the marginalization of the poor. Now we are seeing a system in which we're creating debtors' prisons. If you cannot pay your fines, if you cannot afford bail, you stay in jail and you stay incarcerated.
It's unbelievable. But once again, even though systemic racism has become almost like a catch-all phrase, people are talking about we have to get rid of systemic racism. But I think for somebody running for office, we really want to know where that happens and how we do it. I know for myself, Lisa, when I was running for office, I felt very strongly it begins with the children. We have children, and I'm sure there's some in your district that go to schools where they don't even have the adequate school supplies with which to teach a child to read. If a child can't learn to read by the age of 8, the chances of high school graduation are drastically decreased. The chances of incarceration are drastically increased. So to me, if we're really going to talk about diminishing the numbers of people in prison, not only getting rid of private prisons, but it just seems to me we need such a massive transition, front-ending our resources into the lives of small children, because you're a mother of 4. It all happens in the first 8 years, right?
Yes, absolutely. And education is an issue not only throughout the country, but in this district where we have segregation of our educational system. We have public schools that are not receiving the funding that they need, that don't have the teachers that they need, and cannot provide any resources such as, social workers, guidance counselors, anything that our children need, no wraparound services. And then we have private schools that are receiving our tax money. And that is where the more privileged kids go, and it's on our dime. Instead of investing in the education of all children and eliminating that process of segregation in education, we are creating the divide and allowing it to happen.
There's something so immoral about basing our educational funding primarily on property taxes. It means a child grows up in a poor neighborhood will get a less quality education. And it feels to me, Lisa, that to withhold education, a really high quality, I feel every public school in America should be a palace of learning and culture and the arts. To withhold a high quality education from any child in a country as rich as ours seems to me like a passive form of oppression. And it all starts right there. I mean, even when they talk about race-based policies like historical Black colleges or to help with home ownership, these kids are locked out by the time they're 10 years old.
Yes, and to address the problem of systemic racism just requires so many policy changes, such as, you know, redlining, so that people of color are not receiving mortgages or loans to get houses in certain areas. The small business process, you know, not allowing for money for the opportunity to have a small business. It is really on every level that we experience this. So when you ask the question of how do we address the systemic racism, it's really in everything that we do. But it starts with recognizing that it is there and that it has a profound effect on people of color and our Black communities. So we have to start by recognizing that, and then we have to have very real solutions to each one of the problems that are faced when people are just trying to live the American dream. They just want an education. They just want a job that pays a living wage. They just want to be able to buy a home. You know, these are things that everybody should be able to do, and there should not be barriers.
Well, the fundamental crisis today, it seems to me, is that we have lost our attachment to the philosophical underpinnings of this country. We are no longer emotionally committed to a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We're a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. And as long as our public policy is guided by short-term profit maximization for huge, whether it's prisons or prison industry or oil and gas industry or big pharmaceutical industries or defense contractors or gun manufacturers, then the people themselves are little more than economic serfs. And that's where we are. And as long as we continue to elect people who actually hold that system in place, maintain it, build on it, and perpetuate it, then nothing is going to change. And that is the message that I'm saying to all of you who are watching. Lisa already knows it, or she wouldn't be running. And, you know, as someone who has run for office myself, one of the reasons we wanted to do this summit is because it's really hard to run for office. It's a dirty business out there. It's tough. And the people who are standing for real progressive ideals are not getting the corporate bucks. They're not getting the corporate donations, and they're not getting the support usually of the Democratic establishment elite. So they're usually people who are running as Democrats, but in this kind of like limbo land that so many progressives find themselves in today. If we want to change this, then this is up to you and me. And I hope that you will go to lisaring.com. I want to take this opportunity to thank those of you who have been using this as an opportunity, both with the individual candidates, also at progressivecandidatesummit.com. I've been very touched by that. As Lisa has already mentioned, it's hard at a time like this because she can't go out knocking on doors. She can't get some of the personal contact. This is a woman who is committed to actually making the changes that we all say we want to make. But everybody's wringing their hands, oh, we can't have it. And you've probably heard me say before that cynicism is just an excuse for not helping. We have elections in November. Nobody here is under the illusion it's going to be easy. Lisa's the last person who's pretending it's going to be easy, given that you're in Georgia and your governor's they're going to do everything they can to suppress the vote, aren't they, Lisa?
Yes, it's already been a mess. Our primary was a mess. We just got our last county certified this evening, and the election took place last Tuesday. So counting all the absentee ballots, we had issues with a new machine system. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't have power sources. They couldn't connect to the internet. We had problems with people not receiving their absentee ballots on time. There were so many issues, and we already, we have a lawsuit already in this state, but those lawsuits never seem to make a difference. We just go from lawsuit to lawsuit, but in the meantime, we've lost votes and we've disenfranchised voters. We have a real crisis in Georgia when it comes to elections. And if this primary was any indication of what's going to happen in November, we have a lot to do to try to prepare so that we don't have the same problems. But we tried to prepare for this election, and it's still.
Well, the whole country was watching. We saw what happened in Georgia. We saw what happened in Nevada. And I think all of us live with some fear in our hearts what's going to happen in November. And the president himself has said, well, it's a risk for me if there are mail-in votes. So he's going to try to make that not happen. We have to surround all of this in prayer, I believe, because we're on some very, very thin ice in this country. Once again, lisaringforcongress.com. I hope you'll check it out. Like I said, if everybody who watches this gives $1 or $2, our candidates will have a good night, and that's what we really, really want from this. Lisa, we have a couple of people with questions for you. Is that okay with you?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good. Okay, our first person is a woman, a young woman named Eva Nebold. So if Eva Nebold would come, Newbold will come in. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Fine, nice meeting you. Welcome, thank you for being with us. And there's Lisa, and ask away.
All right, I first want to just say thank you, Lisa, for running. Having a candidate whose progressive policies are exactly what this district needs, having a candidate I can be excited about, who I can get behind 100% means so much. So thank you.
Oh, absolutely.
Now,
I was just going to ask you before you ask your question, what do you do, Eva?
I do a few things. I work for a local church. I'm the director of religious education there.
Oh, how lovely. How lovely. Great. Okay. Talk to Lisa.
Now, climate change is one of the most critical issues of our time. When you're elected to Congress, what would the first steps be that you would take to address the climate crisis?
Well, again, we have so much work to do, but where we need to start is by stopping all the rollbacks of our environmental protections that were put in place in previous administrations over decades. We have to stop the gutting of protections of our environment. The next thing that we need to do is stop offshore drilling, not allow actually the beginning of offshore drilling here in Georgia. We've never drilled before. We have probably the only congressman who would like to allow oil drilling off our shores. So that's another start. But I have a program that I've been talking about for a few years now, the entire time I've been running, that would make Georgia a global leader in clean sustainable energy sources. I believe that we could be a hub here on the coast of Georgia in doing research for these energies and in implementing them. We could bring solar energy companies to rural Georgia where there are no jobs and provide decent paying jobs. We could provide tuition-free training and retrain the veterans that we have in this district. We have over 75,000 veterans in this district. We could train those who are displaced from the fossil fuel industry for renewable energy jobs. And we could be leaders in mitigating sea level rise, as well as creating an infrastructure that is a green infrastructure and creating like an electric transportation system in this district for the first time so that we can meet the needs of people. We can do this in a way that brings good paying green jobs to this district, which we desperately need, and at the same time, do something about climate change to stop it and to do our part in the world. So we could be the Silicon Valley of clean renewable energy sources. That is my goal here on the coast of Georgia. I think we're a valuable district and we can bring that to this district, and it's a win-win situation for everybody.
Now your district is 17 counties and it covers the entire coast of Georgia, right?
Yes, 100 miles of coastline.
Wow. You know, when I hear you speak, I'm so reminded this almost tragic irony of the fact that America's in so much trouble. And Eva, obviously the environment is an example. We have 7 years of radical change, or else there could be whole swaths of continents so hot, massive food shortages, massive economic breakdown, huge numbers of environmental refugees. And yet everything that Lisa said, we could do it differently. And we have in every area, environmental, children, education, economics, we have the people and the best practices that absolutely could demonstrate a fundamental change. We just need to get people like you in there to make those, with those levers of power, so you can make it happen. Eva, how did Lisa do with her answer? Did she satisfy you?
Yes, that's exactly the answer I would want from a representative. I mean, the climate crisis needs to be addressed everywhere, but in a coastal district, it's imperative. And I think Lisa's plan seems feasible and it's well laid out. And I think we can do it and move forward in the first district.
And in the meantime, you're an environmental activist in Georgia?
Environmental justice is one of the top issues, and it should be one of everyone's top issues.
And of course, how that intersects with racial justice as well. I mean, there's a reason that more Black people are getting COVID, because more Black people have diabetes and asthma and heart disease, et cetera. And so many of those factors are environmental and food, et cetera.
Environmental racism is real.
I know it is. And I visited Denmark, South Carolina. I've visited many of the places, but it's the same in Newark. It's the same in Flint, Michigan. I tried to bring this up in my own campaign. And I think out of the tragedy of everything going on right now, racially in the United States, there is a growth of awareness among many people about such things as this, that there was so much distraction and denial about before. Thank you, Eva. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we have another questioner, Lisa, and that is a young man named Raiden Wilder. Okay, Raiden Wilder, if you'll come into the Zoom room, I appreciate it. And please unmute yourself. Any minute now, he will be here. Raiden Wilder. Well, hopefully they're bringing him up, Lisa. But how do you feel about, I bet you feel that you have a lot of young people who are working on your campaign, right?
Yes, so Georgia did a wonderful job in 2018 of bringing younger voters into the process. And well, they did it themselves too, when they led the fight against gun violence. So they were more empowered, and we have a lot of young folks working on our campaign and that have been volunteers that are really engaged in the process, and it makes me hopeful for our future.
You feel even more of that in your race this time than there was in 2018?
Well, again, because of the virus and because things are scaled back, we don't even have.
You don't even know.
Yeah, there aren't students at school right now that can be interns, and there isn't a whole lot of socializing and campaigning going on. It is all this.
I want to remind everybody who's watching, you don't have to live in somebody's state to go to their website, Lisa Ring for Congress, and you will use them, right, Lisa, for phone banking, even if they're not in Georgia?
Yes, absolutely. We need all the help we can get, and any type of social media help as well.
These are the kind of people we want to send to Washington, everybody. These are the kind of people, and we can do it. LisaRingForCongress.com. Now I see a young man named Raiden Wilder, and you've joined us with your peace t-shirt. How are you?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Ask Lisa what you want to ask her.
Hi, Lisa. As a member of the LGBTQ community from the 1st Congressional District, I grew up in a traditionally conservative area where discrimination is common. Whether that's in the workplace, schools, or regular day-to-day life, what are some propositions you would propose or support to make LGBTQ folks feel protected, safer, and more accepted?
Well, we have to expand on what the Supreme Court just did this week with putting protections in place against discrimination. We have the Equality Act, which seems to get caught up in the Senate and stalls there, that we need to pass. The Equality Act, which calls for not discriminating on the basis of a lot of different qualities, but one of them is sexual orientation, the other is gender, and really expanding the definitions of what it means to discriminate. We have to not allow for the, particularly in Georgia, as you're familiar with, religious freedom movement that allows people to discriminate on the basis of their religion. It allows them to deny services or, to deny things like adoption to LGBTQ people, and that cannot be allowed. So we have to expand these protections and not allow this discrimination to happen. So that's a start. But also we have to do things like provide health care for trans people. We have to include those protections. So the whole host of social issues that affect all of us are really personified in the LGBTQ community, and something that we have to be more mindful of when we talk about these issues.
You know, I'm sorry, when I was a child, I remember being taught, not just by my parents, but even in school, what the ideal is in this country. And I remember how one of our founding principles is unity in diversity. We're many different cultures, we're many different ethnicities, we're different sex and sexuality and religion. And this is the ideal of America, that we get to be whoever we want to be, as long as we don't hurt someone else. And yet we are united in these common principles. And it seems to me that our lack, as I was saying before, we've lost our emotional and psychological bonding with those principles. It shouldn't matter how you feel about gay people one way or the other. It shouldn't even matter what your religion feels about gay people one way or the other. The issue is that that gay person is an American, and that we should all be committed to the idea that whether they're trans or LGBTQ or whatever, that the same rights apply to every single American. And it seems to me that this is such a time in our history for all of us to re-embrace that ideal. And the fact that we have a diminished commitment to that is as threatening to the underpinnings of this country as any enemy we could ever come up with. Are you feeling hopeful yourself, Raiden, as a young gay man, and particularly in Georgia, not just in the United States, but in Georgia? Where do you feel we are, and how do you feel?
Well, I feel like that we've made steps towards equality. I think we have a long way to go. I think progressive candidates like Lisa Ring are important for equality and for the progression of our country in general. So I'm hopeful. I'm nervous, I'm worried, but I'm hopeful that there's candidates that are moral and honest and that genuinely care about everybody in the district, whether they're LGBT, Black, white, no matter their religion, that they're going to be represented fairly and equally by our Congresswoman.
Do you feel an interest among your own community and people knowing that Lisa is the progressive candidate, and make the connection in their own minds to how important it is to support her and help her get elected?
Oh, I think that Lisa running has definitely, at least among my friends who are in the LGBTQ community, she's helped us like feel represented and feel like we're seen. Because for so long, like Lisa had said, the first congressional district was just written off as a solid Republican stronghold that no Democrat should even run for. And so with her running, even just her running without winning, it just shows that we have at least a voice, an advocate, someone who cares about us and cares about our right to adopt a kid, or our right to marriage, or from freedom from discrimination in the workplace. So I think her running just by itself definitely helps me and a lot of my friends feel like we're seen, and we don't need to be afraid of who we are, for sure.
How old are you, Raiden?
I just turned 20.
Just turned 20?
Yes, ma'am.
You're the best that America has to offer. Are you in school? Are you a student? What are you doing?
Yes, ma'am. I currently go to Georgia State University in Atlanta, and I also work as well.
And what are you studying, and what do you want to do?
I'm studying pre-law, and I want to be an immigration attorney and help people immigrate here.
My father was an immigration lawyer. He was a well-known immigration lawyer, and my brother is an immigration lawyer. And I grew up with the plight of the immigrant front and center in our family's conversation. And I know my father would be very proud of you too. It's a great legacy, immigration law. Thank you so much.
Thank
you for being with us.
Thank you.
Lisa, it's so clear that it's people like Eva and Raiden who need to be represented in Congress. You know, I recently moved to Washington, and I was walking down the street with a friend, and there are all these big, beautiful buildings here, you know, and you can really see all the big, beautiful, not even just the governmental buildings that we all know, but just a lot of other business high rises and stuff, the lobbyists, where the lobbyists are and the lawyers are. And I said to my friend, who are the people who represent the people? And she said, well, they're the nonprofit organizations. I thought, this is so messed up, because that's what Congress should be. Congress should be. And it's so, when there are so many millions and millions of Raidens and so many millions and millions of Evas. And I understand the impulse of the heart that leads you to want to go to Washington, to go through what you're going through as a candidate. And I really admire you that you've come back again the second time to make it happen. I want to ask you, Lisa, because, I know you'd be representing a district in Georgia, but you would also be voting on all of the issues that face the nation, including foreign affairs. Do you have anything to say about the state of the world and the foreign issues of our foreign relationships as well as domestic? And of course, what we're going to, we might have Donald Trump as president, we might have Joe Biden as president. What do you want to see happen on the issues of foreign affairs when you get to Washington?
I want to see diplomacy come back again.
You mean you don't want to continue with a $760 billion defense budget and $40 billion State Department budget?
No, see, I'm a military mom. We are a military family. But I recognize that war should never be the answer, that diplomacy should be the answer, and that, when we talk about raising the defense budget, we're not talking about people like my son being paid more than $5 an hour to do their job. When we talk about our military, in our district, 18% of those who serve, military families, are receiving food assistance, and they're getting food from food banks that are near bases. So
first of all, I want to slow down, and I want you to say that again, because I want everybody who is listening tonight to be really clear. I want you to say it again. I want you to say it slower, because it is so shocking. I've heard it before, so it's not news to me, but it's so shocking. Please say it again. The percentage of people in the military who are on food assistance. Please say it again.
18% of military families are receiving food assistance. These are people who have devoted themselves to our country and who are working full time and not being paid enough to take care of their families. So when we talk about cutting a defense budget, we're not talking about those people who serve. We're talking about the contracts and the unnecessary expenditures and what we invest in war. We don't need to be that country. We should be a country that it has good diplomatic relations with other countries, who is able to negotiate with other countries for the good of the entire planet. So we have a long way to go to get to that point again, where we have a reputation as leaders and peaceful leaders. And we need to go beyond what our reputation even was toward peace, and not be so quick to jump into a conflict or to a war. And nowadays we don't even declare war.
No.
We do these military actions without actually declaring war, so that we don't have to follow certain guidelines, which is even more.
The National Defense Authorization, once again, Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic House okayed that this year and didn't take away any of President Trump's power to deal with Iran however he wants to deal with Iran, including military action. The grip that the military-industrial complex has on Washington, on both parties, and as you said, it's not like it's to give money to the actual men and women who are going overseas and having to fight these wars. It's things like those B-21 Raiders, $560 million each, the Air Force ordering 100 of them. Most people don't realize this. When, somebody might ask, well, what does a bomber have that it costs $560 million each? Well, what it has is that it drops both nuclear and domestic and regular bombs. So then you take it in and you say, well, why do we need 100 airplanes that drop nuclear bombs? You drop 10 of those and it's over for human civilization as we know it. Obviously, this doesn't have to do with our security. Obviously, this has to do no differently than you talked about all the money being made on our prisons. It's all the money being made on war. The situation has become so corrupt that I think it's very difficult, it's very uncomfortable for people to really recognize that our government is a system of corruption. Our economy is a system of cronyism. Our policing is a system of violence. And it's difficult to take that in, because a lot of people say, if I really take that in, it will be too uncomfortable. But I think that's what adults do. That's what a mature mind does. You have to look at it. You're the mother of 4. If God forbids your child is sick and the doctor tells you the test results came out bad, You wouldn't say, oh, I don't even want to hear about it. It's terrible. You'd say, tell me everything so that we can figure out what we're going to do about it.
Right. Yes, we have to live in reality. We need to look at the way things are, and we need to change them so that we are actually doing our job and meeting the needs of people. That is the sole purpose of government. Government doesn't exist to make a profit. It is not a business. It shouldn't be run as a business.
I couldn't, you know, that when people say this, our government should be run like a business. No, it should not be run like a business. It should be run like a family. You put your children first. You put your children first. Everybody, I want you to go to lisaringforcongress.com, and I want you to do everything possible to help this woman win. It's not easy to win races. If we really want to claim this country for conscience, if we really want to shift from an economic to a humanitarian bottom line, if we want to have trickle up economics rather than trickle down, if instead of looking to a bunch of corporate aristocrats who drop crumbs from the table in the form of job creation, if instead we recognize that when people are educated, when people have access to capital, when people have access to healthcare, they have access to their own creativity and productivity, and that's where money comes from. This is a fundamental paradigm shift. We can make this shift, but only if we put people in Congress and in the White House who are prepared to do that. And it comes down to you and me. It comes down to the voters. And we're living at a time of an awakening. Don't you think so, Lisa? I mean, with everything going on in the country right now, people are waking up.
I would like to think so. I would like to think that out of all of this, something good is going to happen, and that we are finally going to get to a place where we expect to do better, and we make that happen. Yeah.
You know, when you were talking about race before, when I was a little girl, I'm old enough that I remember when I would go to the Medical Towers building with my mother, and there was a sign in between the elevators that said colored bathrooms downstairs. And I remember asking my mother why, and my mother explaining it to me. Now, I'm not glamorizing or romanticizing America before the 1980s, but I can say that there was a time when we all agreed it was supposed to be a just country. It was supposed to be a country in which we were trying to actualize our ideals. That there was a time when even on the left and on the right, it didn't matter whether you were Republican or Democrat, where there was the sense that you're not supposed to be a racist, you're not supposed to be a bigot, you're not supposed to be an anti-Semite, you're not supposed to be a homophobe. And there was a sense that major political voices that represented those ugliness, those uglies, would never be given a serious political megaphone. And what's happened is that these levees have fallen. And we have a president, of course, who gives a wink, wink to all those voices. So it worries me when I see so many people, young people particularly, who don't have an institutional memory. They don't have a memory of a time when it was understood we were supposed to struggle for those things and always seek to have a more perfect union. And that's also why I get so happy when I see people like Raiden, who was here earlier, talking about LGBTQ rights and saying that he sees in you a champion, and that a new generation is coming up that will take a stand for these things. And does recognize the importance of electing people like yourself. And I know that when you go to Washington, you're not going to forget Eva. When you go to Washington, you're not going to forget Raiden. You're not going to forget the soldiers. Like it's your son is he in the Army?
He's in the Army in Texas. He's at Fort Hood.
You must be very proud of him.
I am proud of him, but I worry about him as well. He was deployed to Iraq. He's only just turned 21, and he's already experienced, the military in its full glory. I am very proud of him, but I worry for him and for all of us. I did want to say something about when you were talking about how we did not accept racist leadership and so on, or we knew that we should do better. I have to say that now that I live in Georgia, I see that that has not always been the case, that we had governors and we had people who are in positions of leadership who were openly racist and hateful and got the support of the entire state and a large population of this group.
Well,
And
let me ask you about that now. Where do you come from?
I'm from Connecticut originally.
Well, hello. So what about Georgia now? Because I think there's a lot of curiosity about Georgia now and about Kemp, et cetera. Tell us about Georgia now.
Well, I don't want to discourage anybody, but it is very much backwards. It is very much what it used to be. I think Georgia,
in certain ways, haven't we?
Georgia has learned to hide its good old boy system, which is still in place, which is why Ahmaud Arbery was hunted down and lynched. Basically, a modern day lynching. That is the system we have here in Georgia. And it is also our political system. It is the system that disenfranchises voters. It is a system that is still in place. It is just much quieter and it is harder to place. With people like Trump in office, it allows them to be a little bit louder and to feel a little more comfortable so that we can identify them more readily. But it has always been there and it is as strong as it has been. The thing that we're seeing change, though, is the backlash. What we're seeing are the people who have had enough. They've had enough of the killings. They have had enough of having no power in this state and in this district, and they're willing to stand up and fight back now. They will not be intimidated, and they want real change. They don't just want, half-hearted promises that aren't going to fix anything. We need to get to the heart of it, and we need to change the entire system. Now, that scares the people who are in power, and they will do anything to not relinquish that power. So it is a scary position to be in, but it's one that people who live in Georgia are familiar with. And we were segregated until the 70s. Our school systems were segregated until the 70s. So it has been in our lifetime that this system, was in place, and it has not been decimated yet. So
have the American police been infiltrated by white nationalists, do you think?
I think that there are certainly, there's a tradition of that in Georgia. And, the police officer, the sheriff that is a member of the KKK on the side, we still have that here. Yes, we have white nationalists here that are in law enforcement, and that's all over the country. And I don't want to demonize law enforcement, because there are certainly, I have law enforcement in my family, and I know that there are officers who want to do the right thing, and they are there because they want to protect and serve everybody.
And they risk their lives for that every day, and I honor that. How did Georgia give us the liberal president, Jimmy Carter?
So Jimmy Carter was a wonderful president, and he was certainly someone that my family loved.
Mm-hmm.
But I wouldn't say that he was all that liberal.
Yeah, not yet.
He certainly did have a sense of equality and dignity for all. And I think that may have maybe been a personal thing, something that he was established in his family, or maybe from his faith. I don't know. It was a quality of his character, I think, but that is not very indicative of the state of Georgia.
And you have people in your district who want to fix that, who want to transform that. And
absolutely.
The way to
who demand it.
Wow, Lisa, I very much admire you. I admire you that you're running. I admire you that you're speaking truth to power the way you are, particularly in a state like Georgia. I hope that those of you who have watched tonight will do everything you can. Go to lisaringforcongress.com or go to progressivecandidatesummit.com. You can donate in either place. I hope you're calling your friends. I hope you're texting people. I hope you're telling them. I hope you'll be looking back. We have these on YouTube. This interview will be posted. Be involved. There are so many ways of being involved right now, and all of us need to be involved. And this is a multidimensional problem we have in the United States. It's a multidimensional answer, but you cannot overestimate the role of electoral politics in turning this ship around. November is going to be a hugely important issue. And Lisa's district, she's in Georgia. We already know about voter suppression in Georgia. So we got to help her in every possible way. And she's got a runoff. That's in August 11th, right?
Yes, August 11th.
Okay. Any final words you have to say to people, Lisa, before we close?
I just want to say that, first of all, I never thought that I would run for office, but then I thought I would be a one-time candidate and I would not run twice. But then a week after the election, I realized that we had come so far and I couldn't just walk away, that we had more work to do and that the district was counting on me to lead that work. And I really have gotten the support of the district people who have put in their time and money and effort, and we have to keep going with this. So my only goal, it's not necessarily to win a seat and to be a congressman. My goal is to make as many changes as I can possibly make and to have a positive effect, not only on this district, but on this country. I think that we can provide for people and we can create a life. We can do better than what we've been doing. We should expect more and do better so that we can all live our best lives and we all have the same opportunities to do so. So I will keep fighting until I'm not fighting anymore. And I don't foresee that happening. But I need everybody's help. I've always said from the beginning, I can't do this alone. It is not about me. It has never been about me. This is about everybody. So I need everyone to stay in the fight and do as much as they can. Don't get discouraged. We have a long way to go.
Well, the founders called the House of Representatives the People's House. They wanted it to be the farmer. They wanted it to be the blacksmith. They wanted it to be the tailor. And today that would be the mothers. It would be the artists. It would be the humanitarians. It would be the scientists. It would be the teachers. It would be, as in the case of someone like AOC, the bartenders. It would be the people. And I said earlier, Lisa, that I thought that Raiden and Eva represented the best of American young people. And I think you represent the best of the American woman. You're out there doing what we all know that it's our job to do now. And I think that we're just awakening to the fact that America's economic system was devised before women had a role in the public domain. And raising children was considered women's work. It had nothing to do with politics. And we are in the public domain today. And we are calling for serious fundamental changes in our priorities, massive front ending of our resources into the lives of our children. Those things that we know as mothers, right? We know, I mean, the things that you know, the fact that you yourself were a correction officer. We need people who are corrections officers in Congress who know what's going on inside those walls and knows about recidivism and knows what it takes so that people will not be coming back. All of you who have been watching, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone else, I hope, we have one more night of our summit. Tomorrow night, we will be with Liam O'Mara from California. But I hope that you have learned, as I certainly have, and have been inspired by all of the candidates that we have had here. Lisa, you were talking about the bill that has to pass, the big obstruction to so much of this regarding LGBTQ and other things has to do with the Senate. So I hope you guys also will not forget what's going on with Andrew Romanoff running for the Senate in Colorado, Betsy Sweet, who you met last night, running in Maine. And Lisa, I wish you the very, very best. I feel now what I felt when I first saw your picture, and that's that I hope that someday we get to have lunch. You're very,
yes.
very cool. I so appreciate your having been here. And I want to remind you once again, guys, you can work for Lisa's campaign. You don't have to be in Georgia. You don't have to be in her district. Get onto lisaforcongress.com. There's no reason for anybody right now to be wringing your hands and saying, oh, there's just nothing I can do. There is so much we can all do. And the message we all have to share with each other is, let's do it. Much love to all of you. Lisa, God bless you. Good luck.
Thank you.
LisaRingForCongress.com. Remember, go to the ProgressiveCandidateSummit.com. Give what you can. Tell your friends about it. We have one more night to go. I hope I see you tomorrow night. Thank you so much. Bye, Lisa.
Bye-bye. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much.